This particular talk tonight is the last in a series of talks that I've done called Yogic Alchemy. And the Yogic Alchemy really is talks but also practices that are geared towards the feminine, or towards feminine consciousness. So I've done 5 of these talks now, including this one, when I've done it. And like I said, this will be the last in the series. And really the idea of this is that we have the understanding, the metaphysical understanding of the subject matter, which I got into last November, December and January. Those talks are called Spiritual Incarnation, and they were just talks, they were just presentations that I gave here, actually in this cafe. And there were just 3 of them, and they really formed, you might say, the theoretical understanding of this body of work. And the idea really is that we are in essence spiritual beings, we are indeed here on a human journey, and what Spiritual Incarnation describes is how we can incarnate more of ourself into physicality. The consensus, I think during the old age, you might say, or the ancient age and the modern age, has very much been towards what the ancients called mukti, or liberation, and how we can get as quickly as possible the hell out of here, basically. Yeah? As painlessly, as quickly, and as graciously, we just want to escape, in a way. Now the idea behind the theory, which supports these practices, is that the opposite is actually true. That this is no less a spiritual place than any other dimension or any other realm. In fact, for us right now, this is the spiritual world. And it's the material world as well, we know that. This is also the spiritual realm, or the spiritual world. And the idea really is not to get out, but to get in. And for the most part, the difficulty we have is doing exactly that. Is actually bringing our full consciousness, our full resources to bear upon this incarnation. So this I termed Spiritual Incarnation. And this was a series of talks which basically described the metaphysics of the whole universe. I remember going back about 3 years, I remember thinking when I was in Norway at that time, there needs to be some kind of foundation course in the subjects of healing, the esoteric and metaphysics, because there's just so much information out there. There's so many even conflicting points of view. You know, you go to one person, they'll say one thing, you go to somebody else, they'll say another thing, blah, 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 blah. So what I thought I would do would actually be, in a way, to provide a foundation for understanding the cosmos, the universe, and everything that's inside of us in terms of our inner world, our inner cosmos. And this I did in talk 1. And that was just a 2-hour presentation that we just blasted through that, and we got a clear understanding of the various energies that comprise nature and reality. And I'm going to go through that again today, not in 2 hours, because I've only got 2 hours. In fact, I've only got an hour and a half, because, as I said at the beginning, this is part of a practice. This is Yogic Alchemy, so I'm going to have to leave at least half an hour at the end so we can have some fun with the practices.
Good.
Good, who said that? Yeah. Some of these talks I run out of time, I honestly do, and I get to like 2 hours and we've done no practice, and that's the end of it, and then we have to pick it up the next time. So I'm really determined this time that we're going to really get into the practices. It's the last talk, I really want to root that in and ground that. Okay? So I'm going to talk for an hour and a half, and then we're going to have a half an hour of practices. So the 2-hour talk I gave on Spiritual Incarnation is going to be 10 minutes. Literally, 10, 15 minutes. I'm going to fly through it for you. Petra, you weren't here either, were you? And Chrissy, I don't think you were here. I think the very first talk was back in November last year. So I'm going to go through it again very quickly, but I'm going to give it a new slant, because today we're going to be focusing on sacred sound. We're going to be looking at something called mantra. Who's heard of mantra? Who's used mantras? Okay, let's ask it the other way around. Who hasn't used mantras? Okay, one. Okay, just the one. Okay. Okay. Do you know what mantra is?
I've heard of it. I don't really know a lot about it.
Mantra literally means mind tool. Man is Sanskrit pertaining to mind. Tra, tool. So mind tool. So we're going to use mantra as a mind tool. And the reason why we're going to do this is because all practices, I think no matter what school, tradition, or faith that you follow have at their very heart the idea of stillness. And yet stillness, for us human beings, is the hardest thing to attain to and to hold. Isn't it true? It's the most difficult thing. So in the work and the practices that I do, there is a preparation that takes us into stillness. There's a step-by-step process. It's like a stepping down before we can enter into that stillness proper. If we try to go from our busy life and everything that we've got going on in our brains, which is a lot these days, more than we should have probably, straight into stillness, we're going to be really struggling with that. And I'm always amazed that most people, they just take people straight off the street, plonk them down on a meditation cushion and say, let's be still and silent for the next hour or two or more, without any kind of preparation whatsoever. Without any preparation. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to describe the preparation and the modalities that really are going to result in stillness. And mantra is going to be one of the key tools we're going to use here today. So I hope you got your vocal cords and your throat chakra all activated, because you're going to need it. Yeah. All right. If we go back to the beginning, if I go back, for those that don't know me, I started out my career when I was 18 as a Vedic or as a Hindu monk. I lived in an ashram, mostly in India, but also in northwest London here in the UK. One of the first things we learned when we were initiated into the ashram lifestyle was a Sanskrit phrase. Now, I've said this many times, and some of you will be familiar with this, so bear with me if you are, and I'm sure some of you are. I'm going to say this again, and I'm going to explain this, because it's the foundation of everything that's going to follow on from today. This is Sanskrit that I'm going to quote, and I'm going to speak this ancient language, as it were, just one verse, and then I'll translate it. And it goes like this. Achintya Beda Abeda Tattva. Achintya Beda Abeda Tattva. It means inconceivable, but simultaneously the same and different. So it's inconceivable, but simultaneously the same and different. So what does this mean? It's actually referring to the nature of the soul and the nature of God. And it's saying that we are inconceivably and simultaneously the same as God, and yet completely different. That's why we start with the word inconceivable, because you can't conceive of something simultaneously being the same and different at the same time. The analogy I often give, in the Advaita school, they give this idea of a drop, water, dropping into an ocean and dissolving, to represent the identity of the soul, as it were, merging with the identity of high consciousness or God. I'm sure we've all come across the analogy of the drop in the ocean. My understanding of that is not correct in the absolute sense of the term. In fact, what actually happens if we use the same metaphor is we take the whole of the ocean and we merge it into the drop. In that way we maintain sameness and difference, because we've still got the whole ocean within us, and yet we are still a drop. Can you see that? We've maintained, in other words, our individuality. We haven't lost that. And this is the key behind the teachings that I was involved in, is that individuality at any time is never lost. It's never lost. We have that, but we have an expanded individuality that grows and 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 grows over millennia and millennia through dimensions and levels of reality that we can't even conceive of here, until we encompass eventually the whole. You have to grab a seat from back there.
Can I sit on the sofa?
Yes, yes, by all means. Yes.
There was a reason why.
Huh?
So there was a reason why they sit.
So, if we go right back to the very beginning, I'm going to come over to this chart here. Let me just grab this one and bring this down. So in the absolute sense, God, you could say, in the ancient view, is a completely unmanifested force. In other words, it has no shape, sound, colour, nothing. It's completely what you could call void, nothingness. The ancients called this the absolute, or Parabrahman. It's also known as. Who's heard of this term? Parabrahman. Yeah. Okay, great. So out of this force of the Absolute came two primary forces, sub-forces you might say, that resulted in the whole of creation, everything manifesting. And the reason behind this is because Para Brahman had an impulse to know or to taste or to experience him herself. He wanted to know himself, but for real, not in an intellectual mental capacity, because at that level of reality mind didn't yet exist for a start. It's a much lower dimension of reality. But at that level he wanted to taste it, to feel it, to experience his glory, his wonder, his magnificence. To do this, he had to create two separate aspects, a masculine and a feminine. In the Hindu scriptures, this is referred to as Shiva, or consciousness, and Shakti, or energy. Have we all heard, or are we all familiar with these terms of Shiva and Shakti?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah? So the principle of Shiva represents the masculine aspect of the divine or consciousness. It's active, it's dynamic, it molds, it inspires, it seeks to imprint and create. But it can't do it on its own. It's a little bit like men cannot make babies, well, maybe very soon we can. Test tubes in laboratories maybe. But naturally we can't make babies on our own. We have to have the feminine energy. So this other aspect is the same, identical energy, but it's completely passive. So whereas the masculine energy is completely positive and wants to imprint, the feminine energy is totally 100% passive and wants to be completely molded and imprinted. Right? Both aspects are identical, but diametrically at the same time totally the opposite. It's also inconceivable. Yeah? Masculine and feminine. So when the masculine energy moves, it imprints into the feminine and creates everything according to the higher intention of will and the design of the higher levels of consciousness. The feminine energy, in its rawest state, at its deepest level, is what we refer to as the Kundalini. Who hasn't heard of this force of Kundalini? Okay, everyone's heard of this. Who knows what this is? You've heard of it, haven't you?
I have now.
Yes. Oh, yeah, okay. Yes. Look, you know what this is? The Kundalini force. Now I'm going to tell you what my understanding of this is. At the highest levels of consciousness, the masculine, you could say, is the field of oneness. What happens when the male energy drops down from the absolute to manifest itself, so the masculine energy comes first, is it manifests a realm of light and consciousness. This is the first thing that is manifested, light. Now the reason why I'm telling you this story is it's very, very key, because this is the very first intonation or the very first invocation of mantra that we will always use, is created at this moment. So in terms of sound, in terms of vibration, this moment marks the beginning and the most primal sound of all. And I'm sure you've all heard of this. It's the Om. Scientists refer to this as the Big Bang. The Om. Yeah? This is primal sound. What I mean by primal is it comes before anything else in creation. This is a masculine sound associated with the force of consciousness and Shiva. Okay? This sound, it cleans, it widens, and it opens. Why? Because that's what the masculine does. It seeks to penetrate into the feminine, basically. Not to get too graphic here, but it seeks to basically instill its will, or its thought, you might say, if you could say it's a thought, but its intention for creation into the feminine energy, the Shakti. So this is the Om. And I have heard this sound inside of myself. And it's the most, almost feels like the most devastating sound I heard. It was running all the way up my spine. And it felt so powerful, it felt like it was going to take apart every molecule in my body. And it seemed like it was never ending. I just happened to tune into it for a few seconds. So my experience of this is that the universe is constantly in the process of creation. It's constantly omming. And that's a never-ending background, primary, fundamental vibration. And this is the key. This is the key to mantra. And this is the key to understanding of why mantra is so very, very important. And has been so important for millennia. This is not something that's just concocted just in the 60s or the 70s, you know, or anything like that, someone taking LSD or anything like that. This is going way back. You know, so far back, it was way before even written language was even written down, around about 5,000 years ago, way back before that, as part of an oral tradition that maybe is tens of thousands of years old. They had this understanding of mantra, and they used it powerfully to clean and to purify their nervous system. Now, I'm always pointing to the central nervous system in these talks, because primarily it's our central nervous system that holds the samskaras, that holds the toxic residue of our life, the hurts and the wounds from our past. This is all logged, you might say, or held in the conduit of our central nervous system. And why this is because the central nervous system, via the etheric body, connects with our chakras and connects with our field of energy. We'll get to that in a little while. But everything really that is in our aura, you could say, at one time or another will be felt or will be impulsed into our central nervous system. So really what we're looking to do is to clean ourselves of these negative impulses, our negative histories, the toxic residue of our past or previous existences even. And this is all held within our central nervous system in this life. So this is key. And mantra specifically has the power to purge, to purify, and to clean the central nervous system. And that's why the ancients used it, and that's why I use it, and that's why I really recommend it. Yeah? So, that's the first sound, Om. The primary sound of the masculine. So the masculine seeks to come down, it seeks to enter into the feminine. And as it does so, it steps down through various dimensional levels in the universe. Now the reason for this I'm going to talk about in May, I hope, when I do my next series of talks. But we have covered it in brief when we looked at spiritual incarnation. There are various threads and various particles of consciousness that descend down from the highest realms, all the way down to the physical. Almost, you might say, stepping down through quantum envelopes each time, creating the different vibrations and the different levels of light within the universe. Getting heavier and heavier and heavier and denser in terms of the frequency of that light. Slower and slower and slower, yeah, as it steps down through the dimensions. So light eventually becomes slower, until it gets down to the dimension which is just above us, the astral world. I'm going to stop there, and we're going to flip over to the other side now. Because like I said, this is just a 10-minute introduction to the main talk, for those that haven't heard this before. So when we have the energy of the masculine, we also have, as an expansion of that, the energy of Shakti, the feminine. So as masculine is positive, and it wants to imprint, as I said, the feminine wants to receive that imprinting. Now the masculine, you might say, is infinitesimally small. It's tiny. What the Shakti, or the feminine component is infinitely large. It's everything. Everything in this universe, and every level and every dimension of existence is created out of energy in one state or another. So if you just think of this physical universe, because it's the universe that we're most familiar with, it almost seems like it's limitless. Beyond imagination, the billions, if not trillions, of stars. I mean, there are billions of stars in this one galaxy. I mean, imagine it. It's just inconceivable to the mind how vast the Shakti energy is. This is the feminine. In the Vedic understanding, it is said that it is the feminine that has the power, not the masculine. I'm sure a lot of women here would probably agree with that. Yeah. I know in my relationship it's certainly true. Yeah, so anyway, so this is Shakti. It literally means energy, it literally means power. And actually the physical universe really is a condensation of this. Energy just moving very, very slow to create matter. So this is matter and energy, but ultimately at its source it's energy. And at its lowest levels, as I was hinting at earlier, we have the Kundalini force. It's the opposite of the highest levels of consciousness. If you think of the masculine, the highest levels of consciousness, you have this undifferentiated field, the oneness of spirit. It's the masculine consciousness. Then you have the opposite of that. You have the oneness of energy. The undifferentiated primordial energy of the feminine. The Kundalini. The primary stuff of creation. In a way, everything is created out of this. And I believe, personally, this is the quantum flux that quantum mechanics is pointing to, that it is the foundation of our reality. And it's the combination of consciousness and energy that molds and creates absolutely everything, from the tiniest of atoms to the largest of galaxies, at every level. And the universe is created at every single level. So in the astral world, you also have astral planets, and astral suns and stars and galaxies. You know, so at every level you have this creation going on. In fact, at this level it's at its smallest and the most insignificant. I have a picture here that I wanted to touch upon briefly. I'll come back to this. This is called Vedic cosmology. And it basically just describes in a rather poetic and graphical form exactly what I've been just talking about. If we come to this level here, we can see something here called the Brahmajyoti, which is the oneness of the spirit light, of the masculine consciousness. And then coming down, you can see this energy steps down, steps down, steps down, steps down, and then you can barely see it here. There are 7 levels and dimensions which represent the 7 higher planes. Then there's the earth. Then there's 7 levels below that, which represent the feminine kingdoms. So when we talk in metaphysics about the 7 levels of consciousness or the 7 realms of dimension, we're usually only referring to the masculine component. In the Indian system, they said actually we can flip this and we can also go down. And there are beings, there are elementals, there are creatures and societies and technologies and cities and towns and trees and people living down in the lower 7 kingdoms as much as they are in the higher 7. So altogether the system comprises 14. 14 kingdoms, 7 above and 7 below. 7 masculine, 7 feminine. But that's just an illustration. I mean, this is basically taken from the Indian scriptures. The interesting point here, although we actually see here, this is the oneness of spirit. It's only halfway down the page, you might notice. And there's a whole bunch of stuff going on above that. So this is something really which is peculiar to a tradition in India called Bhakti. The Bhakti tradition focuses on the heart and it focuses on devotion and love. And in that tradition they say that actually beyond the oneness of spirit, there is still life. And actually, all of this is only 1/4 of the manifestation. And the other 3/4 is happening beyond the Brahmajyoti, beyond the realms of light. And this is the realm, really, you might say, of pure love. Pure love, pure consciousness. And that's what in Sanskrit is called bhakti. And this seeks really to go beyond this level even, to go beyond this level of oneness, to taste this, which is divine love, which some say, and I do believe myself, is the very foundation of everything. So even beyond light, even beyond consciousness, even beyond energy, is love. And it's out of love that everything has come. Masculine and the feminine, the whole lot, the whole deal. And there's a whole load of information about this in the Indian Vedas. A lot of information, a lot of stories in scriptures that are called the Puranas. Who's heard of the Puranas? Yeah, a handful. The Puranas came much, much later in terms of our understanding. What initially came was something called the Vedas. Are we all familiar with this term Veda? Yeah. Veda literally means knowledge. And it was actually compiled and written down around about 5,000 years ago by a great sage called Veda Vyas. His full name actually was Dvaipayana Veda Vyas, which literally means island born, because he was born on an island. But he was a great poet and he was a great scholar. And he wrote the Vedas over the course of perhaps many, 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 many decades, or even perhaps hundreds of years. He compiled voluminous information so that something in there would appeal to anybody at any time in any walk of life. And it's almost like a book of prescriptions. You could look in there and you could find out what it is that you need to do in order to advance your consciousness. So no matter who you are, where you come from, there is something in the Vedas for you, because it describes all modalities for all beings for all time. And this was no doubt a mammoth task, and in the end he had to divide it into the Rig, Sama, Atha and Yajurveda. So he divided it up because it was just too voluminous. And after he'd done this, he sat and he felt a little bit depressed. And he couldn't understand why. He was thinking, oh, I've finished this task, this life's work, I've completed it. And yet I don't really know why my heart is not glad. At least a little bit relieved that I've got this job out of the way. He was really, really quite depressed. And he couldn't figure it out. It was a mystery to him. And he was a great sage, and he was very accustomed to traveling in the inner worlds and the inner dimensions, and yet he didn't have answer to why it was that he felt so sad. So his spiritual teacher, a great sage called Narada Muni, descended out of the sky, as he had the habit of doing, and appeared before him. And he knew exactly what the nature of Veda Vyas's problem was, and he knew also the solution to this. And he said, even though he created this magnificent work, it was incredibly prescriptive, but it missed one thing. He forgot to talk about real love. So he talks about the mechanics of consciousness. He talks about the methodology by which we can advance our consciousness. But he didn't actually talk about what in Sanskrit is called lila, or pastimes, stories that actually evoke the feeling of love from the heart. So he gave them the task of going off and actually talking about these pastimes, and then he compiled the Puranas, which became these voluminous stories. The Mahabharata, the Ramayana are included in that. The Bhagavad Gita actually is in that as well. It's part of the Mahabhagavata Purana. So they came later, and it was only then that his despondency and his sadness and his depression lifted, and he felt gladdened within his heart, because he felt full of ecstasy, he felt full of bliss. He felt the joy of pure unconditional love. And this is what we're going to experience here tonight. Yeah. I hope. The whole game really is to experience this, as far as I'm concerned. Because when you experience ecstasy, and when you experience bliss in your heart, you don't want to know about anything else. You're just fine. And you don't care about what's going on in your life, or what's happening with the election, or what's going on with Totnes and the High Street. You're fine. And you're happy, and you're full of that bliss, and it's overpouring. There's a very, very beautiful scripture, a Bengali scripture that I studied one time. I went to Mauritius for 4 months just to read this one book. It's in 17 volumes, so it took me 4 months to get through it all. So I went to live with this Brahmin family in Mauritius, and they happened to have this. That's why I went there, because they had this book. Took up a whole bookshelf. It's called the Chaitanya Charitamrita. The Chaitanya Charitamrita. Yeah. It's actually not Sanskrit, it's Bengali. And what this book describes only, and it only describes, is pure unconditional love. And the stories around pure unconditional love. And it just breaks your heart to read this book. It is the most heart-rending. You can hardly read it for tears, actually. So it took me 4 months. I had to have a big box of Kleenex and a big pile of books. And I just sat there reading and crying every day. It is just so amazing. It's so amazing. It goes even beyond the Bhagavad Purana, because it describes only pure, unalloyed, unconditional love. And the essence of that really, in that book, and what they talk about, is mantra. And how in this dark age, this Kali Yuga, where we are currently living right now, Mantra is the key that can open our hearts. It can open our bodies. It can open our energy fields, our chakras. It can do all of that for us. And there is a specific group of mantras I'm going to talk about and introduce you to tonight, which are called Shakti mantras. So remember I was talking about the Om. Well, this is called a Purusha mantra. Purusha means the enjoyer. So typically it's to do with men. Or the masculine force of spirit, which we all are, whether we're in a man or a woman's body, we are all in our essence spirit. So that aspect of us really is the enjoyer. And it says really in the scriptures that we are Anandamaya Vyasat, that we have come here to earth, believe it or not, to enjoy. That sounds like a difficult thing, because most of us hardly ever experience that. We get like little glimpses of it now and again. We try and actively pursue it and hold on to it tightly. Because most of us down here are actually not Anandamaya Vyasat. We're mostly suffering. And we're mostly in pain, which it also highlights in the scripture. Because it describes, basically, this is the nature of the conditioned soul. This is the nature of who we are. And the reason for this is because of the feminine. Because of the feminine energy. It covers us, it shrouds us, it cloaks us, as it were, and it dulls or it obscures the light from heaven. See, whereas the masculine is wanting to come down, the feminine is wanting to rise up. So Purusha wants to come down to meet Shakti, energy and matter, and mold her and impregnate her. The feminine energy wants to rise up. So Kundalini steps up through various dimensions and realms, 7 in total, stepping up all the way to the physical plane. By the time it gets here, it creates these things, physical bodies. And these physical bodies have associated with them energy systems, which are a previous creation, which are below the physical world, you might say. So this is known as our etheric body, this energy body. Who's heard of the etheric? Who hasn't heard of this? So everyone's familiar with the idea of the etheric. The Chinese call this chi force, or the force of chi. This is not prana. Prana is associated with the masculine force of consciousness. Chi is associated with the feminine force of energy. They are both vitalizing forces, but in different ways. One vitalizes consciousness, one vitalizes energy and matter. So prana usually is very much associated with consciousness work, whereas chi is associated with our physical body and our well-being. Yeah, can you understand? You see that? So chi, to the ancient Chinese, was this etheric field to the ancient Indians, which provides the physical with its vital force, its energy that it needs as an engine for metabolism and life. It's the chi behind, or the energy behind metabolism that's driving life. Otherwise metabolism stops. It ends. Because there's a tendency for everything in this universe to go towards what's called entropy. Entropy basically means a state of decay and chaos. So if you look at a physical body, it's exactly what it does when it's dead. It doesn't do that, however, if it's alive. It's what's called negatively entropic. In other words, it organizes rather than causes chaos and destruction. To do this business of organizing and structuring and energizing life at the physical level, you need the force of the etheric, you need the force of chi. That's why it's so vital. So this energy is coming up, the etheric energy and the physical energy. And the energy of consciousness is coming down. And where they meet, we have the astral physical meld. The lowest level that the consciousness can descend to on the masculine side is the astral plane. That's as far as consciousness can descend. It gets to the astral and it stops. It does not go any further. This is my understanding. Some people will say actually it continues to create the etheric and it continues to create the physical and all the other dimensions and realms. My understanding is no, it doesn't. It stops absolutely at the astral plane. And then it meets the force of the feminine coming up in terms of the physical and the etheric. So the astral and the etheric literally grab hold of each other, like the lover and the beloved. And you have this marriage between consciousness and matter. And this is it. physical human incarnation. This is where we bring these two worlds, these two realities together. So God, you could say, has been on a very, very, very long cosmic journey. One positive masculine aspect going through all the realms and dimensions above, one negative energetic aspect coming up from all the realms and dimensions below and meeting right here in this human form, a human being. We bring these forces into balance, the Shiva and the Shakti. Yeah? It's nice, isn't it? And that only happens because the astral grabs hold of the etheric body. It literally grips it tight. It locks into the energy body of this physical vessel. And in fact, astral literally means to grab or to grip or to hold. And it's like the masculine grabbing the feminine. Grabbing her and holding tight. And the reason why the astral does that is because of a little something called samskars. It's the samskars that actually do the job of the gripping and the holding. And that's taught too. Okay. Which we'll do again. I'll let you guys know. If anybody, by the way, wants to know about these future talks, please do not leave this evening without giving me your email address. Okay, and I can let you know about these talks as they come up in the future. We get into samskars another time, but literally these are our wounds, these are our hurts, this is our pain. These are all the memories, you might say, from the past that hold us here, that limit us. They define our egoic consciousness. In fact, the ego itself is made up of the bricks of samskars. It's like a house is made of bricks, the egoic consciousness is made of samskars in exactly the same way. This is the astral body. And it locks in to the feminine, etheric, physical mechanism. What we're going to look at today, and what we're going to go into now, is looking at some of the Shakti mantras. We're going to look at some of the mantras which are pertaining to the feminine side, the female. And we're going to start to practice some of these now, I hope. So we get a little bit away from theory, and we come back to some actual tasting of this. You see, there's two aspects to this as well. I mean, us guys, you know, we can be incredibly cerebral, and maybe I tend to be a little bit too much in that way at times. But we need to couple it, this cerebralness, with the feminine, which tends to be more concerned with energy and how does this feel and what's the emotion of this. You know, that's how women work, much more associated with feeling and experience, which is this world of energy and matter. Can you see? We're naturally aligned in that way. So our masculine consciousness will go towards metaphysical understanding as men much more, and the feminine consciousness tends much more towards energy work and processes. That's why healing always traditionally was a feminine art. So us guys that have invaded that. Yeah. In some respects. Yeah. But it's always the mother, the nurturer, the carer, the nurse. You know, they're all women. They're all at least feminine archetypes, whether they're in a feminine body or whether they're in a masculine body. Okay, so what can we do in order that we can more readily and more easily gain access to tasting what it is that we truly and authentically are? So what I've highlighted here tonight is various processes that I use. These are kind of, you might say, my practices. And there are many, 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 many more outside of this. But in terms of my research into the Vedas and what I was taught many years ago, this seems to me like the condensation of it. This seems like the essence of mantra and sacred sound. So let's start really by defining what we mean by sacred sound. Because here I am, I'm talking to you right now, but would you consider this sound to be sacred, for example? Or is this just words? Is this just a communication, a flow of language? What would distinguish what I'm saying now from a sound that would be considered to be sacred? What's the distinction? And the distinction really is that everything in the universe has a vibration. In the ancient world, they would call this the inner sound. The inner sound. The reason for that is that everything is made up of energy in vibration, moving, buzzing, interacting, and it creates, you might say, well, a sound. It creates a resonance, a frequency. There's a what do you call it, a therapy. It's called, I think, radionics. And radionics basically says that everything in the universe is sound, it's vibration, resonance, or frequency, and you can measure it. And one frequency will be helpful in the absence of another frequency. Or if there's too much frequency, you can add a little bit of this frequency. So they tend to want to heal people purely with frequency. And homeopathy, in a way, does the same. Because you think of a potency, a very high potency, it's not a single molecule of the substance in that pill. Just vibration. The original vibration of the frequency of that substance that created it. So you're going to like a 1M or a 10M potency. Theoretically, not a single molecule is there. So how does it work? In fact, it works more powerfully in those higher potencies, you could say. And the reason for that is because frequency or vibration is the foundational language of the universe. It's the stuff out of which everything is made. Everything has vibration and frequency. So therefore, everything has an inner sound. When we're looking at sacred sound, we're really looking at the inner sound of our inner world. We're looking at the sounds that come from within. And the ancients noticed that within each and every one of us we have various whirlpools, various discs of energy. They called them chakras, energy centers of consciousness. There are 7 physical chakras on the body and 7 above the body. But what they noticed as they travelled into these chakras is that each of these chakras had petals. So they're a little bit like flowers, in a way. So each chakra, of which there are 7, each one has a certain number of petals. And I've actually laid them out for you here. This is the ancient, you might say, depiction of our chakra system with the petals. So for example, the root chakra has only 4 petals. It's pertaining to survival, to the earth, to our needs here. As we rise up, you can see this next chakra here has 6 petals. And then solar plexus has 10. Then the heart center here has 12. The throat center 16. And the third eye has 2. There is one more chakra, the crown, which supposedly is 1,000 petaled. But we don't include that. So what we're looking at here really is the first 6 chakras. From the ancient viewpoint, they saw 6 flowers. And each of these petals had a distinct vibration, a distinct note, a distinct sound. I discovered this once many, many years ago, and I was in a meditative state, and I actually went into one of my chakras. At first I didn't know I'd gone inside of a chakra, because it was just cavernous. It was huge, and to me chakras are very small. But when I went inside with my consciousness, from the inside it looked enormous, it looked huge. And then I asked, where am I? And when you ask a question on the inner realms and the inner dimensions, it's as if the answer comes straight away. So you just ask and it's there. And you just know. So I thought, where am I? Oh, I'm in a chakra. Okay. It's like, you've just got to answer it and it's just there. It's amazing. I think it comes from within. It comes from that inner knowing that we all have. And I realised I was inside of a chakra. And I could see there was a colour and I could hear there was a vibration. There was a vibration. So I feel, if I'm looking at this now, and I didn't really know so much about this back then, but I feel now, looking at this now, I was in one of these petals. Just one. And I got a taste of that and the experience of that. So I know for myself from that experience that this is really real. So what the ancients did is they said, okay, if each of these petals has a distinct vibration, what is that vibration and how can we codify it? And this is exactly what they did. They took each vibration and codified it into a letter from the Sanskrit alphabet. So each petal has a vibration which is a letter in the Sanskrit alphabet. So you've got vowels and you've got consonants. Altogether, if you count all the petals, 4, 6, 10, 12, 16 and 2, it comes to exactly 50. So there's 50 letters in the Sanskrit alphabet, and that's why. So this is called a sacred language. It's sacred because it's vibrational. And it's pertaining to our own inner vibrational chemistry, our own inner vibrational metabolism, the vibration of consciousness as it's structured on the inside. Isn't that amazing?
So does each letter in the Sanskrit alphabet have the vibration of that petal?
Exactly, it does. It has the vibration of that petal. That's where it's rooted, that's where it comes from. So you can see here there's like a ga sound, and then there's a ga sound, which is a longer intonation. One's short, one's long. That's also something that's a characteristic. But you have other sides here, like a ka sound.
So when you're speaking Sanskrit, you're kind of resonating with the petals in your chakra.
You're doing that exactly. It's a sacred language. It's very, very distinct from something like English, which is why I asked the question in the first place. Because this language, you could say, is the language of form, whereas this language is the language of content. And the Sanskrit language plugs us back into our esoteric anatomy. It gives us the feeling for who we are and what we are. But they went further, because you can use that vibrational information to your advantage in terms of accelerating your evolution, in terms of accelerating your consciousness. Because you can actually then start to say various sounds or various intonations that will help you progress along your path, depending upon what complement of vibrations you already hold. Can you see this? So usually, in the old days, going back in time, you'd actually go into a temple, you'd go into an ashram, you'd take vows, you'd become a celibate monk, and you'd have a guru or a teacher, and they would then prescribe something to you. Because the guru or the teacher supposedly, and I do believe in ancient times, these guys were incredible beings, they were really, truly enlightened. And they had the ability to actually see this for real. They could look at you and they could see your chakras, they could see your energy field, they could see everything about you at the inner level. And they could then make a prescription that met that perfectly. Now that is an art that has long since died, I believe.
So they see a deficiency or something.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, which petals are closed, which are dulled down, which are not open as yet. Yeah.
And is that to do with your samskaras?
It's exactly to do with our samskaras. Most of the samskaras actually they congregate around our energy points. Most of them are focused around our energy points. In fact, in some ways, chakras, as wonderful as they are in terms of consciousness, they're a bit like garbage collection centers, really, in some ways.
So you may not be able to answer this question, but how does, if there's some petals that are not functioning, how does that look, if you like? Is it just not there? Is it just not vibrating in the right way?
I haven't seen that myself yet, I have to say.
And
Yeah.
I'm just wondering how that,
My understanding, these petals close and they open. So it would seem as if, from a clairvoyant perspective, which I assume you're really referring to here, that some of those petals will be curled over and closed, or just missing. Yeah. But I haven't seen that myself, so I can't say personally this is my experience. But my understanding is they could be closed, as the chakras themselves open and close. And often, if you've ever done any chakra work or chakra exercises, it's often said, think of them as flowers, with petals that open and close. And that's a perfect metaphor, really, because they are like that, and they do open and close. I know there was a time in my life when I was getting way too much psychic bombardment. I was getting attacked pretty much every night by very, very heavy lower astral entities. These guys were really mean buggers, and they weren't leaving me alone. I think they wanted to drive me insane. I think that was their agenda. And some would say they've succeeded nicely. But yeah, it's a matter of opinion. But I could feel the pressure of these guys, particularly at night when I lay down. And I realized at some point that I was way too open. I was experimenting with a lot of these energies and doing lots of things that maybe I shouldn't have done, because I tend to push the boundary very, very hard at times. And I was way too open. And because I was way too open, I was attracting these beings. And I had to every night visualize closing, 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 closing. And I had to do it over and over again, maybe for half an hour, closing. And only then will I get a half decent night's sleep. Only then. But if I just lay there, it was wide open. There was no chance. As soon as I closed my eyes, I could see them coming at me. Yeah, as soon as my eyes were closed, there was faces and hideous beings and forces, and I could feel the pressure on my chest and inside my body and on my organs. Yeah, it was just horrible. But closing, closing, closing. After many, many, many repetitions of this, eventually I sealed them off and I closed down my aura and started to protect myself. So this is what can also happen. We can be flown way too open. And there are certain things and certain practices that can do that. And mantra can do that as well. If we overindulge certain mantras, some mantras are very, very powerful. I'll point them out to you tonight. One or two of them on here are very, very powerful mantras, and they can open you in very, very extreme ways. So you have to handle them with
I won't be
caution.
able to resist trying them.
Yeah, try them out. Yeah, try them tonight before you get to bed. Yeah. So these letters of the Sanskrit alphabet that we have here basically describe a vibrational universe, our inner universe. And because this is on our energy body, they're associated with the feminine, because the feminine is of energy. This is an energy field, and the chakras are energy forces, vortices, you might say. So this whole science comes out of the feminine aspect of the divine. It comes out of the Shakti aspect of the divine. And because of that, it has energy and it has power to transform. So let's have a little look at this. What I'm going to get into really now is describing something called Bija. Bija Shakti mantras, which is the title really of this main sheet that we'll be focusing upon here tonight. The Bija Shakti mantras really are single syllable mantras. Single syllable. They may be made up of a composite of Sanskrit letters, but they are one syllable mantras. Now, normally when we chant a mantra, we have a very complicated, sort of thing, a whole sequence, a whole chain, it's like a chain. It's like a chain of sounds. These are not like that. These are totally different. In fact, if you were to take those very, very long mantras and break them up into their distinct components, you would actually be left with what's called Bija mantras. And Bija literally means seed. So when we're talking about Bija, we're talking about seed sound. These seed sounds are the primordial sounds behind creation. The primordial sounds behind creation. Just like the Om is the primordial sound, out of the Om comes all other sounds. So as the Om creates more and more levels of differentiation, more and more levels of complexity with the feminine, more and more these vibrational sounds are created, up to a full complement in the human of 50. Now there may be more than this in the greater universe, I don't know. But I know within us we have access to 50 seed or core fundamental sounds. And I'm going to just let you have all of these tonight. Basically, yeah. It's exciting, yes. Yeah. The primary sound, of course, is the Om, as I've already described, the Purusha, the masculine sound that kicks off and sets everything into motion in respect to creation, basically, yeah? That's the Om. After that, you've got the 9 fundamental vowels in Sanskrit, the 9 vowels. The vowels in Sanskrit are associated with spirit and consciousness. So these are key sounds if we want to hook in to our consciousness and spirit and advance our consciousness. We can use the vowels. I've got all 9 of them here. So these are also in a booklet if you want to grab one at the end. And for anyone that hasn't been to previous talks, I actually printed out the templates from the previous talks as well. You can also grab at the end. So you can have a copy of this, you can take this home with you in one of these little booklets. Okay? So when we're looking at the Om, what happens first is the creation of the feminine. Remember we said there was the masculine principle and the feminine principle. So the feminine principle is the I'm. So we have the Om, which we're all familiar with, but what we're not so familiar with is the I'm. Who's heard of the I'm Bija mantra? You have.
I am. Is it?
I am, yeah.
I am.
Yeah. You could say I'm. Yeah, in the English word, and not to confuse the two because they're not the same. So you mustn't think I'm in the Sanskrit word is the same as I'm in the English I am. Okay? It is a pure vibration, and that's it. It doesn't have any real understanding or interpretation to that, other than that is the primary feminine sound, the counterpart for the masculine Om. Do you understand that?
It's interesting in the way that Om is so much more prevalent
It's associated with consciousness, that's why, yeah.
Time, you don't even
No, hardly ever know, and that's why I ask, who's heard of it? Actually, you said you had, but you were joking, weren't you?
It was a way to say it. It was a way to say it, wasn't it? I am.
Yeah, you can.
I've
Yeah.
only heard of it because of your talk.
Oh, which one?
You covered that
Yeah.
I did that upstairs, did I?
Yeah,
Oh, I forget what I'm
yeah.
saying these days, I'm going senile. So I have covered that before.
Yes,
Okay,
yeah.
all right.
Briefly, not in great
Not,
depth,
not as much
we
detail as we have
covered
today.
it,
Okay. The I'm is associated with higher knowledge. You see, when we talk about higher knowledge, we're talking about wisdom. And what is the whole point of manifestation? What's the whole point of creation? It's so that God can experience himself. Consciousness can experience itself. In human terms, this would be called wisdom. Knowledge that is gained through direct perception or experience. In Sanskrit, they call this Sarasvati. Sarasvati. And she is associated generally with, with learning, with understanding, with communication, with wisdom and knowledge. Much of what we're doing here tonight, before I come out here, I always chant the Sarasvati mantra, which is the Om Aim Sarasvati Svaha mantra, and I do that many times, and I come and do my talks. I think it's working. I don't know, but I think it is.
Definitely.
Yes, definitely.
Definitely.
Okay. So this is really a mantra which really puts us into touch with inner knowledge, higher awareness, wisdom, as we would call it, Sarasvati. The ancients also had a word jnana, or gyan, that they would really mean knowledge, or knowledge of the inner worlds. So the sound Aim is the bija mantra for Sarasvati. In other words, that is her mantra. That is the vibration of this, you could call goddess, if you like, or goddess energy. Now, when I talk about this, I'm not really meaning, although maybe I am in some ways, an actual lady, playing a veena, sitting on a cloud somewhere. This is not really what I'm meaning by goddess energy. What I'm talking about here is primal archetypes of consciousness, blueprints of consciousness. Do you understand what I mean by that? This is a mold or a template by which our consciousness can move into and experience something. And there are many of these molds, blueprints and templates, archetypes as they're known, within the universe. Fundamentally, I believe that these are the core archetypes within human consciousness, and there are 50. These are the 50 primal archetypes that all human beings are grappling with in order to become enlightened. 50 molds of experience. 50 expressions, you might say, of the divine. So this is the first one, I'm. So I'm going to chant that. I'm saying it now as I'm talking, but I'm going to say it one or two more times, and then I'm going to get you guys to say it back to me. How are we doing? Yeah, we've got 55 minutes. We've got 25 minutes to cover this. Then we're going to get into pranayama and the practices, which I want to get you guys back into, because this is what this is also really about. And this leads into that. So I always do my mantras first, and I always go into the pranayama and the deep meditation after, because mantras are fantastic for stilling the mind. Remember where we started? They still the mind, I feel, like nothing. It's just, everything just goes calm. It's great. And then you can get into the breath. And then you can really get into stillness. It's fantastic. Yeah. So, the way I say this is, Can you hear that? Can you feel that? Yeah. So straight away, even though you've never heard this before, you can feel it straight away. Do you want to have a go? Thinking. Okay. It's not compulsory, you don't have to if you don't want to, but it'd be good to get that energy going a little bit. So I'll count you in on 3, and then we'll just do one I'm together, okay? See how we do. So 1, 2, 3. Feel it? Can you feel that? So straight away, that chakra, that petal in that chakra has been open and active. Immediately it opens it. And that's why you get the feeling. The vibration on the outside corresponds with the vibration on the inside and activates. These are incredibly powerful. If you do this 108 times, you really feel your world will move. It rocks. And you just come right down. You can do it quieter and you can do it a little quicker, which is what I do. So I use my mala. I don't know if anyone's familiar with Mara, but these are these beads here. These are Tulsi beads from Vrindavan. It's a place in India. And there are 108 of these in a loop.
What's the significance of 108? Why?
My understanding of that is there are 108 gopis associated with the Krishna energy. Now, Krishna is often associated with the Hare Krishna, but Krishna goes a long way back before the Hare Krishna movement, believe me. Yeah. Krishna is also a mantra. It's made up of sacred sounds, and it literally means the all-attractive Godhead. The all-attractive, really, is what it means. So Krishna really came to demonstrate the nature of God and to teach humankind about 5,000 years ago, according to Scripture. And he performed various loving pastimes. And amongst those pastimes is something called the Rasa Leela, or the dance. You may have seen pictures of Krishna with lots of women around him. And supposedly there were 108 gopis, which were his female associates that danced with him that night. And every single one of them danced with a version of Krishna, apparently. None of them thought that Krishna was off with some other woman. They all felt that Krishna was just there for her. And every woman thought that, even though there was supposedly only one Krishna. So it was quite an amazing dance. Even apparently the devas, the demigods, came to witness that, because that was a miraculous thing to behold. Yeah. So it's 108 gopis, which is why particularly this here, and there are also 108, I think, Puranas. That you know, it's 108. Basically, it's a very, very auspicious number. Yeah. Where was I? Oh yes, I'm.
What does that relate? What chakra does that relate to?
Well, I'm really relates to the throat chakra.
So do these correlate with the?
No, there's not a correlation here, I'm afraid. It's not like you can fit them in like that, no. But this does correlate with the throat chakra. In fact, it's said if you really want to understand mantra, and you really want to activate mantra, you have to first of all go through Sarasvati, because the petal for this is here in the throat, and this then becomes activated. It's a key principle in chanting mantras, is that you can say a mantra like I'm, and it's a mechanical thing. But there comes a point where that sound becomes what you would call a sacred sound through the process of activation. Now, activations were usually handed to the disciples by the teachers in years gone by. So the guru would give the student a mantra, and in the giving of the mantra, the guru would activate it for the student. This is what used to happen. Now we have to activate it for ourselves, which is a little bit more of a tougher job. And it really relies upon us adopting a stance with the mantra, a reverential stance, a stance of devotion, a stance of prayer and respect for the mantra, and really hearing the mantra when it's sounded. Now, I know when I used to do mantra meditation many years ago in India, I used to be able to chant and chant mantras and not hear a damn thing that I just did. You know, it was just mechanical. You know, I just kind of switched off and I was just thinking about ice cream, or my next trip to Delhi, or wherever I was going that weekend, or whatever was going on in the temple that morning. And I was just mechanically just saying these mantras. Well, that is not the right way to do these mantras, and that's not an activated form of the mantra. But at first it will be mechanical, because it's new and you're learning the sound. But if you come into the mood of worship or prayer, or you come into a mood of reverence with the mantra, it will be activated within your chakra. But it requires really that we surrender our ego and we placate and we, as it were, almost throw ourselves on the floor before the goddess, as it were, in order that we can receive her blessing, you might say. And this is how they would traditionally have seen this. But for me, really, it just holds a very healthy stance that activates what's required within us. And the reverential surrendered space or surrendered mood does it. But at first, you're going to be thinking about, oh, am I pronouncing it correctly? Am I hearing it? Am I really attentive? So you get over that stage, and then you really start to move into the mood and the cultivation of the mood of reverence towards the mantra, and then it becomes activated. Now, activated mantras are like tens, if not hundreds of times more powerful than non-activated ones. So you have to keep going through that kind of drudgery stage at the beginning, where you're just repeating, but nothing's really happening much, before you get to, wow, okay, I'm really getting this, and it's really opening me, which comes at the point of activation. So you keep at it. But even having done that, just saying it once here today, you could feel it. But I suspect this mantra is very active within me, because I use it a lot, and I've been using it for quite some time. Okay, let's move on to the next one, and we'll just go through these quite quickly now, and then I'm going to go into something called the Gayatri. So we'll just look at these, and then we'll look at the Gayatri. So the next one in the sequence here is called Harim. Harim. The next mantra. Down here we have Shrim. Shrim. This one also, this one's associated very much so with Lakshmi and the law of attraction and the power of attraction, the Shrim mantra. At the beginning of it, it's Shri, which means beautiful to behold. You often see this in Indian titles to books or to scriptures, where they say Shri or Shrimad Bhagavad Gita, for example, or Shrimad Bhagavatam. It means the beautiful Bhagavatam or the beautiful Bhagavad Gita. So Shrim is really associated here with Lakshmi, or the goddess of abundance, or the archetype of abundance, and the law of attraction and how that works in the physical universe. So many individuals, when they want to attract something specifically into their life, they use this bija mantra here of Shrim. Should we have a try first of all with Hrim, and then we'll go to Shrim? Yeah? Hrim is associated with the heart energy. It's associated with the heart of us. It brings warmth, it brings heat, it brings light, and it brings love. The Hrim. It's associated with the sun, obviously. So let's try Hrim. So it goes like this. Hrim, Hrim. It's a bit of a harder mantra. You want to try that? One time only? So after 3, 1, 2, 3. Hrim. Different feeling there, yeah? But still there's a feeling. Let's go to this one. Stream. So it's sh sound here, as you can see. Reem. Shrim. That's how it's pronounced. Shrim. So I'll say it again once, then we'll cue you in. Shrim. Okay, 1, 2, 3. Shrim. Okay. How's that feel? I'm going to go through the rest of these quickly. I'll just go through them once. I won't get you to repeat them, otherwise we'll run out of time. Because I want to go over here and do the Gayatri, and then we need to get into the practices. So we've got a lot to get through still. So we're doing okay? You keeping up with me? Yeah? All right. So we've done Om, Aim, Hrim, Shrim. Next one is Krim. Then we have Klim. Hom. Hlim. Stream. Trim. That's the lot. How does that feel?
Lovely.
Does that feel powerful? They are amazing. They are amazing. So I've given you a brief synopsis here, keywords as to what they're about. But really you can just try them and see how you feel. Perhaps try one and repeat it maybe 108 times.
Can we find those on the YouTube?
Yeah, you can. Actually, now you've got this exact spelling. Thank you for that, Sally. Now you've got the exact spelling, and this is phonetic. You can actually type this into YouTube, and you'll find there all kinds of video clips of well, Western people, but also Indian Babas, and sometimes professional musicians that are actually chanting these mantras for you, so you can get a really good sense of how it's pronounced. YouTube's a good resource actually for that. You type in exactly what I've written here. Yeah.
If you don't have the beads, I mean, how can you count?
If you don't have the beads, how do
If
you
you don't have
count?
the beads, I mean,
I just do it for maybe 5 or 10 minutes. I would
10
say
minutes.
I would say 5 minutes of you know, for example, I would go shrim 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 shrim. 5 minutes of that is about 100 or so. Maybe 6 or 7 if you want to go a bit slower, you know, to start with. Yeah.
you could make your own beads.
Well, shall I put a link on my links page on my website for where you can go and buy them? Yeah, you can actually buy them on Amazon. So you can just, they're called Mala, M-A-L-A. So you can just type in Mala beads, and you can see them there, 108. The Christians have them, you know, the rosary. In fact, the rosary was taken from this, because the rosary is 54, which is half of 108. So they saw the 108 beads that the Babas were using in India, and they thought, oh, we're not going to copy them, we'll just have half. And you can even get ones that are less than that, like a quarter, you get like a 27. Huh?
I sell some malas.
Oh, well, here we go, we've got the Mala Walla. Walla is Hindi for salesperson. Yeah, so,
Amongst other things.
amongst other things, yeah.
But I just
So
wanted
have a
to
word with Chrissy on the way out if you want to buy some Mala. Yeah.
I just wanted to check with you. Are the petals the same for everybody? I know they
Yeah.
get changed by different things, but ultimately this is the same template for every
Everybody.
human being.
Yeah.
And so if somebody is like an avatar or an enlightened child, could they see that these chakras were completely as
Open.
they should be?
Yeah, in the avatar, you mean?
Yes,
enlightened being.
or in, yeah.
Yeah, their petals would be all open, every single chakra, every centre. Not the case with us because we're still incarnating
Yes.
some of our consciousness. It's only when that aspect of us is incarnated that we activate one of these petals. But we can use the sound to draw that in.
Yeah.
And in doing that, we clean any associated samskaras with any of these petals. So that each one of these is a certain quality of spirit associated with, in the East, a certain deity, a god or a goddess. So they would depict them in graphical form, you know, like Ganesh or Shiva, Parvati, Kali, Krishna, you know, Radha, Saraswati, you know, there's so many goddesses and gods. So each one of these is associated with specific vibration of a specific petal on a specific chakra. So they looked at them in that, what I would call a very poetical, very right brain way of describing this. We tend to be more left brain analytical in the left, you know, in the West. So we look at these as vibrations and resonances and archetypes of consciousness that we're looking to bring in. New instructions, new blueprints.
So
Yeah.
You say there are 50 petals,
Yes.
but you've
50.
shown us, what was it, 9 or 10 sounds?
Yeah,
So
these
there
they
are
are.
more sounds.
Yeah, there's another collection which are the Purusha mantras, which are associated with the force of the masculine.
Mm.
These are the Shakti mantras, which are the most powerful, associated with the feminine, because they've got power and they've got energy behind them. What you tend to do with a mantra is there tends to be a combination of the Shakti and the Purusha. So what happens is the Shakti provides the energy, the impetus, and the Purusha part, or the consonants really in the Sanskrit language, provide the direction and focus. So a certain mantra is a combination of vowels and consonants, of feminine and masculine sounds that brings energy and focus. So these are used in many different mantras with many different types of consonants to create different effects in the world and within your consciousness. So it's like the masculine directs it, focuses it into manifestation.
Absolutely fascinating.
It is, it's amazing.
It's totally
Yeah.
mind-blowing.
It is. Well, we'll go over to that now actually, we'll have a look at that, because what I have here, what I've previously given you, and this is also in the new book, is some mantras here which are using the combinations of vowels, Shakti and Purusha consonants from the Sanskrit alphabet. So for example, this one, which one was I using? The Shrim mantra. Let's look at the Sarasvati mantra, because that's the one that's always recommended for beginners if they really want to activate mantras, is the Sarasvati mantra. You go to that first, and it gives you the power to say mantras. And when I mean the power to say mantras, I really mean the power. I mean, in ancient days, the Brahmins used to be able to say a mantra and it would manifest something in reality immediately. They had the power to manifest just through sound. And I do believe, and I've done some research on this, that this is how the stones were moved to create the pyramids. They used the power of the feminine directed through specific conduits of sound at the stones that lifted them. And they just were floating, and they could just move them into place.
Cool.
I'm very keen to discover that myself. Yeah, it'd be very, very helpful.
For all those big stones you've got to move.
Yeah, some big stones, yeah. But even they used to have technology which was based upon sound in the ancient days. And this is mind-blowing. They had something called Vimana. Who's heard of Vimanas? Well, Vimanas, yeah, Emma, Vimanas literally are flying machines. But they use a combination of mind, heart, sound to propel them. There is no fuel. It's pure mantra energy.
It's amazing.
Yeah. I think they used mercury in some of them, I think crystals in some of them, there were different designs. But it was powered by mantra. I actually downloaded the scripture which actually describes how to build one of these flying machines. It's called...
So we'll see you in Thomas.
Yes, got a shed in my garden and busy there most nights building my
Norway again.
Yeah. Total nutcase I am. But the idea is that you can actually, there actually are physical machines that actually ran on sound, supposedly. Sound energy, mantric energy, because the whole universe is sound. It's unlimited, so they just tapped into that. But the interesting thing about the scripture that I downloaded and I read is it didn't talk about so much about how to build a Vimana, which is what a scientist would be obsessed with. But it talked about the consciousness of the pilot. Most of it was concerned about his food and his diet and his meditational practices and what kind of yoga he had to do in order that he could sit in this machine and control it. Because he had to be completely, totally attuned to the mantra and the mantra to the machine.
Good excuse to not getting to work. Oh, I wasn't feeling very well.
Yeah.
So on my...
Yeah, I mispronounced my mantra this morning. It didn't work. Anyway, apparently these are well documented, and you'll see this depicted in the script. You hear stories about this in the scriptures all over. It's amazing the technologies they talk about, and I believe that these things were actually in ancient history real. And I'm going to do a talk here, probably in May or June, on the idea of time, and how really we've just come out of a very dark, very ignorant time. But before that, there were times when we were much more advanced in our consciousness as a species. And we have technologies that we can't even conceive of now. That's my understanding. It's something called the Yuga cycle. And I'm going to look at that and talk about that when I get back from Norway in May or June. That'll be the first talk, actually. Yes?
How would, if you want to methodically go through your chakras and cleanse them, what would you use?
I would use the chakra mantras.
Oh, right.
Yeah. I was going to go here, but let me just So as you've asked the question, let me just back step one step, because as well as each petal having a sound, each chakra, through the combination of all these sounds, also has a sound. Can you see? Which is this chakra seed sound, or the chakra bija mantra. So we can actually chant the bija mantras for the chakras as well, to activate the whole of the chakra and all of the petals. It's not as powerful, obviously, as a specific one, so you have to work on it more, because there's going to be some aspects of that chakra which are activated and some which are dormant. And you're working in a very general way, but it's fine, and it works very, very powerfully. I usually go through this once before I start doing my pranayama. So I just do the root, sacral, solar plexus, heart, throat, and third eye, and the crown chakra is silence. Now, some of you are familiar with these ones from when we were doing the practices, and as we're going to go into the practices, I'm going to do these in a little while. But for now, I'm going to just skip past that and go to this, because I want to give you the idea of how the vowels and the consonants come together to make feminine Shakti and masculine directional force for these mantras. Yeah? So I'm going to chant a mantra, and I want you to see how you feel after I chant this. To see the effect of it on your body and your psyche, okay? Let's go for the first one, as I was saying, which is... So this is Om Aim Sarasvatiye Swaha. Om Aim Sarasvatiye Swaha. Om Aim Sarasvatiye Swaha. That's what happens when you combine feminine Shakti bija mantras with masculine Purusha bija mantras. And I think everybody here felt that. And in fact, I can still feel it. It's really strong, really powerful. And these are all mantras actually I've given you here in the book. So for example, the Kleem mantra is down here. Can you see you have the root mantra for Kleem? Here, Shreem here, I'm here. Yeah? So they're all included in there, the feminine, and then you have the consonants, which comprise the masculine aspect of the mantra. Gives it direction and focus.
So that I'm in that mantra, is that the same as...
Oh yeah, just slightly different spell. That's A-I-M. Oh, E-I-M, sorry, isn't it? But it's pronounced I'm. Yeah.
It's the same then.
Same, yeah. Again, go onto YouTube. You can put these all in and you'll find copious amounts of people wanting to educate you as to how to actually pronounce and chant them. No problem. Are we okay with all of that?
I'm just curious because the
Yes.
Buddhist group I go to, that's the chant that they do at the start of it.
Which one?
So it's quite cross-cultural.
The Sarasvati?
Yeah.
Great!
So they're chanting a Sanskrit word.
Yes, well, Buddhism from the time of Buddha was founded in a language called Pali, which was directly a direct descendant of Sanskrit.
So Sanskrit's quite a root language for
Totally.
any other.
Well, they say it's the mother of all languages, Sanskrit. Every language, including what we call sacred languages in our culture, like Latin and Greek, maybe Hebrew, also I think, yeah, all come from, they say, Sanskrit originally. See, Sanskrit is a vibrational language. That's the key behind Sanskrit. It describes our inner nature. That's why Sanskrit is so powerful, and it's the root of all languages because of that, because it existed even before we could speak, because it was always there in our energy system, vibrating. In a way, Sanskrit is always existing.
So we might even find that our indigenous language, Pictish or whatever, will actually have these sounds as well, because we were listening and resonating with our chakras.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, doing it independently of the people in Asia.
Oh yes, yes. I mean, there are definitely certain sounds, I think, with hymns and certain types of prayer and song, which key into this. I've been to a few performances in churches here in England where, the choral, effect has been really moving, profoundly moving. But I bet you, if you looked at the sound there and dissected it, you'd come up with something that was very, very close, if not bang
You
on.
got Alleluia, for instance.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So do people actually speak Sanskrit, or
Not
is
anymore.
it only a written language?
It's written and spoke, but
I mean,
it's like an
spoken,
educational language.
But it's not spoken in conversation.
Not anymore. There was, actually, no. There is one village now in India that speaks Sanskrit.
Where's that?
Yeah, I found that on Facebook. It's one of those random things that just pop up, you know. Sanskrit-speaking village, you know. I clicked on it and it took me to a clip, so maybe look it up. But there's definitely one village in India that actually speaks Sanskrit. Everybody in the village speaks Sanskrit.
And how's the people like? Makes you wonder.
How's the people like?
Yeah.
What do you mean? Oh, the people in the village?
Yeah.
Well, I should imagine they're very, very, very elevated, very spiritual, I suppose.
So it used to be spoken.
It was a totally spoken language, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. The key to it really, Sanskrit, you have to pronounce everything very carefully and very precisely. Otherwise you won't get the exact vibrational effect. That's the key. And that requires the activation of this centre here, which is what Sarasvati is responsible for, which is why we always do that mantra first. Yeah. Okay, let's shift gears a little bit because we've only got half an hour left. How are we all doing? Do you need some refreshment and a loo break? Petra?
No, I'm alright.
You okay?
Thank you.
All right. Does everybody want to carry on? Are we okay for the last 25 minutes or so? Yeah? Is that exciting?
Very exciting.
We're all energized.
Yeah, yeah.
It's going to feel very weird going outside.
Yeah, it's very exciting, yeah. One of the key things, and just before we move on to the practices, which I'm going to get into next, I'm not going to have time for the Gayatri, are we? But one of the key things really is to move us through these gunas. I've covered these gunas before, and I can't overemphasize the importance of what's called the tree gunas in this work. And this is this last poster here. I'm just going to touch upon this for 1 or 2 minutes, and then we're going to move into the practices. Because a lot of what happens with the mantras is the mantras move us to goodness. So the idea here with the gunas in the ancient world is that nature itself has 3 qualities or 3 aspects. There's the potential to create, maintain, and destroy everything. And everything goes in nature through this cycle of perpetual creation. It sticks around for a little while and then it's destroyed. When they looked at this more closely, they saw that there were certain qualities associated with every aspect of this. So the creative potential, for example, required energy, passion, fire. What in Sanskrit is called tejas, to get that creative impulse out and to manifest something. In Sanskrit, that is called rajas, or the mode of passion. Destruction, on the other hand, decay, entropy, darkness, ignorance, is considered to be tamas, or ignorance. And maintenance, which Vishnu is responsible for in the scriptures, requires the most, you might say, diligence on our part. To maintain a certain level of consciousness, a certain energy, requires the mode of goodness within all of us. So these are the 3 modes, and they saw them as a hierarchy. So you had tamas, or ignorance, at the bottom. It's dullness, inertia, darkness. And then you could rise up out of this mode of tamas to rajas, to passion, which is activity and striving, a bit like Western society. Everyone's out to strive and get what they can. And then sattva, which is where the mantras are propelling us towards, which is goodness, which is purity, light, harmony, and consciousness. So these are the key things. Now what tends to happen in the West is we tend to be down here a lot of the time, or here, and we think we can get to this place which is above goodness, pure goodness, transcendence, without having to go through goodness or sattva. The ancient says you can't do that. You can't miss out this step. If you're going to go to if you're in tamas, or you're in a place of indolence or depression, or you're just very lazy, or you're just very ignorant and you're very inert, the best thing for you is to rise up to passion and activity and action. If you're at this place and you're very passionate and animated, competitive, out there in the world, you know, the A1 type going for it, the best thing you can do then is to rise up to sattva, to goodness. And then when we're in goodness, it's just a stepping stone then from pure goodness, transcendence. So much of what is prescribed in the Vedas, particularly in Veda Vyas's Vedic information from way back, is basically saying no matter where you are in life, we need to elevate you to this platform of goodness as quickly as possible in order that you can make the step then to what's called Suddha Sattva, or pure goodness. So this is very, very key, and a lot of this is about lifestyle, it's about diet, it's about daily practice. And I'm going to get into this more in future talks. But the use of mantra will automatically move us through this hierarchy to goodness, and then we can move to transcendence. We can't get there any other way according to the ancient understanding, and certainly according to my understanding. You have to be here with purity first, cleanliness, clean lifestyle, clean habits, clean mind, clean heart. It requires a lot of honesty because most of us aren't there. We're somewhere down in the depths here, either combinations of tamas and rajas, ignorance and passion. So all these practices really are geared to elevate us. One thing aside, just before I move on, with sattva, one of the quickest ways to actually experience sattva is to live a sattvic lifestyle, which is diet. Diet comes in. Diet is really key to this kind of work, and that's why the ancients always had a vegetarian-based diet. I'm not going to say anything more about that because it's down to everyone's own conscience to decide what they want to do with that. But that's why vegetarianism was really, really, really recommended. For example, in the temple, in the ashram where I used to live, it was pure vegetarian diet. You wouldn't consider anything else. We were just focused on sattva, goodness, the whole time. And if you do that, you'll notice your consciousness will start to lighten, and it'll be much easier for you to taste and experience the mantras, to sit in stillness for longer. It's a very helpful thing. But it's down to everyone's personal preference as well, so, dietary thing is a very personal thing. But that's the recommendation from going way back, is to shift you more to a plant-based diet, really, and ultimately to a prana-based diet. I mean, this is where we're really ultimately going. Forget about meat, fish, eggs, vegetable matter. We're going towards prana, and then ultimately after that, light. And there are some individuals on the planet that literally do subsist on prana. They don't need food anymore. Maybe some water. Okay, so we're going to get into the practices now. So I'm just going to turn this off.